Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Did folks see that beautiful, brilliant sunrise?
Yes, I took pictures of it.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
tempted, but I didn't.
Oh, they're beautiful.
I'm not sure it bodes well for the weather today, but it was gorgeous. So, yeah, very, very lovely. Let's see, we have a guest today, Elena. Welcome, Elena. Always happy to see you. A couple announcements, and then I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, who has something a little different for us to do this morning. First off, for Bill Skiff's memorial service on Saturday, the 27th, I mentioned the sign up sheet last week. I'm going to pass it around the tables because there's still some opportunity to sign up to help either with making some food or helping with this setup. So I'm going to just start at this table, and if you could send it around if you're want to add your name to that list. I also want to mention that we're going to have our next business meeting on Thursday, May 2nd. And I'm going to ask the committee chairs, I'll send you an email later today with the kind of the details, but to prepare a report in advance. Doesn't need to be anything too lengthy or as lengthy as you want. And send it to me, and then I'll send out those reports in advance of that meeting. And that way, during the meeting, because I know each committee only has, not that much time, you'll be able to focus on just the things that are most immediate that you want to talk about with the group. And then also the committee chairs and committees that are working on descriptions. And so we'll share those in advance as well. And those descriptions can now be shared with our members and with any prospective members to give them a better idea of some of the details of the good work that we do in our committees. Any other timely announcements? Barb?
Okay. Excuse me. I passed around the Music for Food sign for the little flyer. And have some flyers if people want to publicize this and put it in different places. We're really happy things are coming together, and hopefully we have support for them. We should.
Yeah, thank you, Barb. That sounds like it's gonna be a really wonderful event, and of course, for a great cause, supporting the food shelter. And then, Vince, you wanna show your thing after Leslie or before?
After.
Okay, all right. Okay, Leslie, it's all you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Look at these wonderful faces. Yay. So I'd like a show of hands if of any of you who have ever talked with anyone who didn't know about Rotary. Okay, so if you're saying to somebody, hey, I belong to this club, and they go, what's that? If you've talked to them about it, your hand should have been up. Perfect. So on your tables, there are 3 descriptions of Rotary that the PR committee has sort of pulled together from various sources. And our goal is to have an elevator speech, if you will, or escalator speech, whichever you choose, so that we can have it on our website for members who may want something quick and easy and can't or don't want to come up with their own. So everybody has paper at their place. There should be plenty of pens around, and we'd like to take a few minutes and have you just jot down what you might tell someone about Rotary to entice them to come and check us out and to join. So you can do this individually, you can do it together. We have about 10 minutes, right? Any questions? Yeah.
You have 3 different categories here. Do you want us to put something for each one?
No,
or all our
I
own?
just want you to use your own. These were just some examples. Some
okay.
came from RI. There's one at the bottom that has LM. I'm not really sure.
Right now.
That's the one that you can feel pretty red in because she's not at all offended.
Yeah.
But anyway, just want to
Okay.
get your ideas.
So I have had the opportunity to see this, because it came through.
So Rotary, Williston-Richmond Rotary Club is.
Yeah, okay.
Dot, dot, dot.
What'd you say?
So I've seen you, Ben, so you're gonna.
Was that?
Are you gonna join us?
Maybe. I want to talk to us.
So I've seen them before, and we're listening. She said in the elevator speech, she's got 2 minutes to say what he's Rotary. And I think these came from someplace else, and then she had written up this one. I've done. Well, you can hire a PR firm and pay a lot of money, because it's a lot of what we're really doing, so I think it's gonna be hard for us to get one, but I like personally. The Rotary, I like the first sentence, well, I like the second one, okay,
Great so far.
but I think it would have to be short, because I also like the first. It's the only club in our community whose focus is on serving the needs of communities. I like that. I don't think we need to see who meet weekly. I mean, that's kind of the question people ask you, you know. So I don't know if that's too much to put together. And the first one, all that is true. It's just, what do you want to say most?
I like this one here mainly because of the timing,
Yeah,
because we don't have people working together. We have so much trauma
Yeah.
and fighting that it is people that are problem solvers. And if we look, we can find them.
yeah.
It's not as easy to find them anymore, but I think that's one of the things that Rotary does because it's non-political.
Yeah, yes, and I think the other one, I like, for some of us, humanitarian service,
Yeah.
highest fulfillment, those are all nice words, but if you're talking to a stranger, so they're.
I know.
I like, it gets right to, you solve, you work with friends and neighbors to solve problems where people unite and take action together. I don't know if every single word is right, but I think we just,
That's the one.
Said neighbors, but it doesn't say that. I like that.
well, we can put friends.
Because I
And-
think that brings it, I mean, the one thing is, how far is it from the community?
Yeah.
Well, the bigger the picture, the further away it is. And this one, if you say.
Oh, wait, it says neighbors and friends. It's
Yeah.
already there. Neighbors
Right, so,
and friends, put that together, leaders and problem solvers.
Yeah.
See a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change growth in our communities. And I like that says themselves, because we do change a little bit.
Right, so that's, that one.
I mean, if you want to emphasize the local part of it, community first, and then, you know, then.
Let's say, communities and ourselves and across the globe.
Yeah.
And. Yeah. And then I think a good tagline is the only club, if you want, so, and this could sort of be like a PS line.
Right.
If Rotary is the only club, our community whose focus is on serving.
You know, I'm not sure if that's true though.
Well,
Because think of the
that's true.
church.
I know.
That, I mean, Pastor Paulson, they're involved,
So I think what you can say is.
but they're not meeting.
We're the only service club. We are the only service club.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's the only
What
school.
about the
that
Elks Club or
serves
something like that?
There is no other club.
in no Kiwanis.
There's no Kiwanis, there's no Lions, there's
They're all
no.
Well,
gone?
let's say.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yep, go right ahead. Perfect.
We are the actually only,
Club.
we are the
in our
only service.
community. This and whose focus is on serving the needs of our local community. I'm not sure, I like saying local community and sort of like our local needs, because I think we like to do something.
Community here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our local needs. The needs of our local.
Citizens?
What?
Citizens, I mean, you know.
Or local population, citizens. Let's do citizens for now.
Residents.
Community?
We've got community, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their original, if I take our.
How about Sandy's own service club in Williston?
Yeah, and then we go back to start talking about the
Whose
needs.
focus is on serving the needs of our community.
Yes, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, serving the needs, keep that, this is what you do when you when you cross out something on a building, you put it back in, you circle it. And when, or you do this. The Rotary is the only service club in Williston. Yeah, whose focus is on serving the needs of our community.
Yes,
With this.
yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I was, the other thing we want to start with, this is a global network of 1.4 million neighbors.
The only real.
You want to start with
People.
And housing people.
Well, no, I
mean,
You mean you don't wanna say global
Well,
first,
I'm
you're
saying
more
that-
like local?
I'm looking for how close is it to you? If you start off with a global network of 1.5, that's not very close to you. You know what I mean? It's
So
a
maybe
bigger.
this sentence should go first.
Rotary is a global network of 1.4 million people.
Well, no, if we put this sentence
Yeah.
first, then it's the only local club that's doing.
I don't agree with that, except I do think that people would be amazed. I think that catches them first, that this is a worldwide
Right.
organization.
Right.
That,
The only thing is worldwide is so big.
no, I don't think we use that word.
It's nebulous.
I mean, we have millions of
1.4 million people working together as neighbors. Let's try this. Working together as neighbors and friends, leaders and themselves.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
see a world where people unite actually to create lasting change.
And one of the sayings that we used to use is, you think globally, you act locally.
Yes,
In other words, you're doing something that you
Yeah.
can do.
right.
You're thinking of the
Well,
big picture, but you're.
You know, that like the polio campaign, really, the Rotary took that on more than any other organization in the world. And now we're down, I mean, there are just a few cases here and
Except for
there.
here.
But I'm saying that,
Okay, so if this were put in as one paragraph, you could do a tagline across the bottom, centered, you know?
Yeah.
Think globally, act locally.
right.
Feel some responsibility.
Yeah, I like that, because we've heard that,
Yeah, and
but you're right. It's just, things are globally
You could write it down.
so overwhelming now with the
Make it into a
problems
song and
that are going on.
then
I think a lot of people just feel almost helpless.
right. Well, you can't, how do you fix a global problem?
That's
From a
what we were
local
just talking
position.
about lobbying. Yeah. When we go to the legislature, they have stacks of bills like that. They don't know everything about everything. I don't mean the crooked lobbyists, I mean more the kind of general public people that are going because they think there's problems.
So it would be. Rotary is a global network of 1.4 million people working together, neighbors and friends, leaders and problem solvers. who see a world where people-
Okay, we have about 1 minute left, please.
Last one. In our communities, in ourselves and across the globe.
Yes.
Rotary is the only service club in Williston whose focus is on serving the needs of our local.
This specific needs.
Okay. Specific. And then tagline, and think globally.
internships or options. There's.
Okay, we got it.
No, one is more like.
Yeah, I think
One of them
that
is more
right
like-
now, everybody just feels so overwhelmed.
Thank you.
We're gonna have to recopy.
No,
it. We're gonna have to recopy it, but we'll get it for you. Okay, no worries. Before I leave today.
A little bit.
Yeah, they,
This is.
but they it's 9,
8,
Rotary,
7.
last time. Oh, this goes together.
Yeah, it's all like this.
It's all for the item.
Thank you all. If people didn't, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
If you didn't have a chance to finish it, you're welcome to finish it after our presentation today, or take it home and bring it back. Either way is fine. You can also email it to me. I just have to say thank you all for the time that you spent working on this. I love hearing the conversations and seeing the hands rapidly scribbling. So thank you. I really, really appreciate it. On behalf of the PR committee, we'll take this information and we'll pull it together, and it will be on the website in the member area. So if you want to go in and check it all out, you can. Any questions, any concerns? Okay. I think you're up then.
Thanks.
Sure.
So I was on the way out to the meeting. And my wife pulled me over and said, "Did you see this article on CAX?" And I didn't get to see the whole article, so I'm gonna play it for you for a second.
After a short. Yay. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Vince.
And thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally.
I don't know which way this one is going.
So Walter,
It's going up.
the floor is yours.
Okay. So good morning. Today I'm pleased to introduce Jeanne Kennedy. She is the owner operator of JB Kennedy Associates LLC, a firm that provides comprehensive government relations and consulting services to corporations, associations, and nonprofit organizations. She served 2 terms in the Vermont House of Representatives prior to opening her business. She served as a member of the Lund Board of Trustees for 30 years, a longtime resident of South Burlington. She now resides in Williston and is a member of the Williston Rotary Club. She has spent over 3 decades working in the Vermont State House and in the Vermont legislative arena. So introduce Jeanne.
Thank you. I won't knock it off. Thank you. And thank you to Walter. I've gone back and forth with Walter saying, this isn't very interesting. So we may have to fill the time with something else. I did want to mention first, though, that this was in our local Rotary book, a magazine. And it is the birthday, birthday of Paul Harris, who founded Rotary, tomorrow. So that's our local news. Okay, so as he mentioned in his introduction, Walter mentioned, I have, that probably should be past tense verbs now. I had a lobbying firm, but I still do some consulting when I can. And when Walter asked me to talk about this, I did really think that, you know, something you do all the time, I loved being in the legislature and I loved lobbying. I loved being in the State House. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to work. But I know from my own family that, oh, you're a lobbyist, and that ends the conversation. Okay, because the image is relatively negative and for good reason, with some of the people who lobby. But I flip things. I have an old desk in my office and I stick things on that I want to be reminded of. And shortly after Walter had asked me, or actually he asked me in the fall and I said yes, because it was so far away. I figured it would go away. Recently, when we've been negotiating this, I was looking at my desk one time and I had this little horoscope thing. I'm a Cancer, and it said that particular day that I'd read it and cut it out of the paper and stuck it on my desk. It is easy to undervalue your own skill set when no one understands what you do. And I reminded myself of that. So I said, well, I'll try this and maybe I'll give them a little bit of understanding of what we do. So first of all, I want to say that lobbying it's a legal protected activity. The US Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the First Amendment talks about petitioning state government, federal government for the redress of grievances. And Article 13 of the Vermont Constitution says that the people have a right to freedom of speech and of writing and publishing their sentiments concerning the transactions of government. And therefore, the freedom of press also ought not to be restrained. So, and these statements have been litigated over the years, including whether or not lobbying is a protected activity. And so we can do it. We are doing illegal activity. I did look up in preparing for this, how many colleges back when I was first lobbying, no college had a lobbying member per se, major. I found about 20 colleges that now.
Could you just describe what lobbying is?
I'm going
Is that
to,
what you're?
yeah,
Okay, because you keep using the term and,
yeah.
okay, thank you, sorry.
You can't go to school, I'm sorry. You couldn't go to school previously and just get lobbying major. You can now. Political science used to be the background major for it. Before I get to that, I'm going to tell you who's in the lobbying arena. Right now in Congress, where there are over almost 13,000 lobbyists. In January of 2019, so that's right after the 18 elections, the people who had left Congress and still went back to work, 50% of them went into lobbying or some kind of government advocacy. In Vermont, there's a huge book, it's 300 pages of lobbyists. It was that thick the last time they printed it. The legislature was that thick the last time they printed it. But in this book say you work for, if you have an out-of-state client and you work with one of their people, they register as a lobbyist, although they may never come in the State House. So what we have in the book is not exactly what you see, but there are over 200 active lobbyists in the State House. And in Vermont right now, about 15 of them were former members. And that doesn't quite tell the whole story because, as you know, Vermont is a very small ancestral state. And there are many people lobbying who have worked for governors, who have worked for legislative committees, who have served worked for the joint fiscal staff in the State House or something like that. And in Vermont, you have to register to be a lobbyist. It's not hard. You don't have to have a license or a degree or anything. You just register and say you're lobbying for someone. And I will get back to that because this might make more sense if I skip to what lobbying is. Well, I'll try to get back to that. A couple of interesting things, I think. I think it's all, I loved it all. Lobbying and advocacy are used together, so I can't skip it completely. And advocacy is making sure that people have their voice heard on issues that are important to them. And it might be, Jude knows that, she worked on something that was very important in Connecticut after her son was injured and got the law changed in Connecticut. And you are all advocates. You might have advocated for your children when they were in school for a change or something, and you're not all lobbyists, don't worry about that, it's not. So, but there is community advocacy, social, one of our greatest advocates in the room is Debbie Ingram. Everything that Debbie does is advocacy. Sometimes it might be lobbying, but not every time that she's doing it. There are no prohibitions to lobbying, although in Congress, senators can't lobby for 2 years after leaving office, and members of the House are prohibited from lobbying for 1 year after leaving office. And in Vermont, a legislator or an executive officer is not supposed to lobby for 1 year after leaving office. There are ways around that, and those ways do it. So lobbying is advocacy, but advocacy is not always lobbying. And lobbying is legislative advocacy that focuses on influencing policy decisions and laws at various levels of government. Direct lobbying is an attempt to influence new or existing legislation by communicating with a member of the legislative body or other government representative who has a say in the legislation. So that's me talking to someone in the House or Senate, or maybe talking to someone in the executive branch or the Department of Financial Regulation or the Agency of Human Services. And when I do that, I am lobbying. Vince, I am going to ask you to put up that wordy one that says statute on it, if you have it. If you do, and I'm going to go ahead and talk while he's doing it. This is wordy, and if you look at it for a while, it's fine. Lobbying is defined in Vermont. So here you go, Elizabeth.
Let me just go back, because I want to share my screen so that people at home can see it.
It's a lot of words, so I'll start talking anyway. To communicate orally in writing with any legislator or administrative official for the purpose of influencing legislation or administrative action. A. B is solicitation of others to influence legislative or administrative action. C, an attempt to obtain the goodwill of a legislator or administrative official intended to ultimately to influence legislative or administrative action. And D, activities sponsored by an employer or a lobbyist on behalf of or for the benefit of the members of an interest group. If a principal purpose of the activity is to enable such members to communicate orally with one or more legislators or administrative officials for the purpose of influencing legislation or administrative action or to obtain goodwill. And a lobbyist is defined as a person who receives or is entitled to receive, either by employment or contract, $500 or more in monetary or in-kind compensation in any calendar year, engaging in lobbying either personally or through his or her agents, or a person who expends more than $500 a year on lobbying in any calendar year. And then you have lobbying firms and lobbying employers, and they have similar definitions there. And when you register, a lobbyist registers for whomever that person is being employed by. And a lobbying firm lists all the people there. I was a firm, a one-person firm, but I had 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, 10 clients, and you list those are your employers. The American Heart Association of the University of Vermont has 1 or 2 or 3 lobbyists, and those lobbyists, that's their only employer in those cases. You pay a fee to lobby, you pay $60 a lobby, you pay it when you start lobbying, you pay a $60 fee. Then if you have more than one employer, it's $60 for the first employer, $15 for each employer after that. And that fee goes through the entire session. So if a session starts in January, if you list somebody you're lobbying for in January, you pay the fee for that it lasts for that whole session. If somebody asks you the last week of the session, they call you up and say, there's a bill that's going to pass and we've got to kill it. And they hadn't been paying attention. They didn't know it. And it's usually, we got to kill it, not we got to pass it. And they ask you to I'm not usually, but when it's that late in the session. If you sign up that day, I got a new client, it's still the same fee. So when you register, it's for the 2-year session. So what does a lobbyist do? There is a perception that we work only to promote legislation or to prevent legislation, and that we do it only by directly lobbying on a bill. So I'm gonna give you a quick, very, very quick run through of bills. Do Bill AA. This is there are probably 100 descriptions of how bills that people usually use an organization to inform people of what they want to do if they want to lobby together. And this one is, first of all, somebody has to have an idea, a person, a town, an organization, or it's the idea that's running across the country at the time. And there are people in the State House who draft the bill, and then the bill gets read on the floor and it's filed, and then it gets sent to a committee. And that happens, those things happen on both sides. And by that, I mean in the House and in the Senate. But in that process, if a bill is being worked on, there can be demonstrations, there can be rallies, there can be all sorts of other activity that happens. There can be radio shows on it. There can be television shows on it. So there's a lot of activity that happens outside the building, and lobbyists need to watch all of that to hear what's being said about the bills their clients are interested in. If it's going to move, there's eventually floor debate. If it's going to pass, there's a vote. And if it passes one body, it goes to the other body, and the same thing happens all over again. And then if it passes, and it might pass, it will pass usually in a different form than it was in either body, in a form that they have agreed to, cooperation agreement. And then it goes to the governor. And the people who like the bill always hope that it will get signed into law, and the people who don't like the bill hope that it will be vetoed. So, and you know that does happen in Vermont. So that's sort of the wordy way of looking at a bill. Now put the other one up then, please. This is the more interesting way to look at a bill. It doesn't teach you very much, but I've always found it kind of interesting. It's B.
Yes, give me a second. And then let me share it.
Can you make it bigger and?
I will try.
I can pass this around. So, what this one really points out is you have a bill is introduced, and what you get down to after a whole lot of stuff, it's a little straight swing, and then you get down to a tire swing. And that's really how much it might change from beginning to end. But all these other things are seen differently. It gets amended in committee, it gets amended on second reading, gets enacted, it gets funded, not so much. It gets implemented by a state agency, kind of broken there, you know. And it gets reported by the media, well, maybe. And then it's understood by the public. And that's what you have. So that's the bill arena that we work in. But how do we get to that place of being able to work in that arena? And by the way, on bills, this year, there have been 884 House bills introduced as of Tuesday and 317 Senate bills for a total of 1,201 bills. That's sort of normal that I've seen over the years. In the last session, 21-22, there were 240 bills passed out of, you got 1,200 this year. And that's about normal. It's usually about a quarter of them that get passed. And then there are resolutions. This year, there are 327 resolutions already in of all kinds. In 21-22, 310 resolutions passed. So if you're going to work on those things and understand those things, you need to get to a level of interaction with the legislation and the people who work on it. And you have to develop a relationship with the legislators, with the administration and all. You first work with the client to determine what their needs are and what their goals are for the legislation, because not everything is killing things. Some is in trying to introduce things, trying to make a bill that's introduced more palatable for your client or work better for your client's needs. So, excuse me, so you develop and maintain relationships with legislators, with legislative leaders, with legislative staff, and there's not much staff in Vermont, which is very important to our lobbying. In Vermont, we do serve a purpose of getting information for legislators. If we are representing an issue that a legislator is interested in, they have staff, they have a legislative council and a set of lawyers and administrative staff, they have a joint council office. They have a committee person who works with them both from legislative council and a committee administrative assistant. Other legislators, the legislators have staff themselves. They have offices. They have a place to go and do their work. In Vermont, you have a desk. That's Carrie and Debbie know. That's your office or your desk or your chair in your committee room.
Chair as well.
So lobbyists in Vermont can play a role of being informative and really helping, and the wise lobbyist will work on playing that role. Then you also have to develop a relationship with administrative people, the agency secretaries, the commissioners, the deputies and all that, and with the executive branch. And very importantly, with the lobbyists, particularly the ones who are going to work against your clients' issues and work with them to see where and when you can come to agreement. And you do all that to educate the policymakers and all the entities that are supporting the policymakers. And you do it because you want to help the policymakers understand what your needs are and then respond to what your needs are. So you have to know the workplace. Again, you have to know the committees, you have to know the building. I remember reading one time, a friend of mine had been elected to the legislature. So being in the building, the lobbyist legislator, so the same thing. And she was asked the second session she went back, what's easier about this session? And she said, well, I know where the bathrooms are. Well, it's by the way, an interesting thing, there are more, until there was an addition, there were more bathrooms for men in the state house than there were for women, because it was built
What a
in the
surprise.
1800s. Really important to know how legislators, how they work, what they're doing for work and what their work means. So right now, there are 13 House standing committees and 11 Senate standing committees. That was 14 and 11 when I was here. That changes, it's changed a lot more than it used to in the last 5 or 6 years. Then there are 20 about joint committees right now, and those are committees that have equal numbers of legislators, senators and representatives on them. And some of them are there all the time. Some of them are for special issues that come up and last only 2 or 3 years. It used to be a joint energy committee. I don't think there is anymore. But a couple that you would know is judicial retention. There's a judicial retention committee. That's how judges' names or potential judges' names get sent to the governor. There's something called LCAR, Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, and rules are another whole process that we could talk about forever, because after a bill is passed, it often had to have rules promulgated to make it, and a lobbyist must follow those rules, because if the rules aren't promulgated the way we think the legislation was written, it can cause a problem. But so LCAR, the Committee on Administrative Rules, goes through all those bills that have rules, and that's a very active committee. It meets every other week out of session, maybe every week during the session, and then a little bit out of session. And then there are other committees, and there are about, I counted right now, 40 or more. Those committees, like a task force or a study, might have legislators on them, but only 1 or 2 or 2 and 2, or has a lot of other Vermonters on it with the expertise of the committee, like pensions committee of a few years ago, had a lot of people who understood pensions, we hoped, on that committee. So legislators can be on any and all of those committees, and lobbyists should follow all of those committees when they're dealing with issues that affect their clients. And that's what you do. You help your client get through that maze of who lawmakers are, what the hearings are, agencies, boards, and you work with trying to introduce them to all those people, work with all those people, so that they can be conversant with all those people. And how do you learn? You learn by listening and watching. I used to get to the State House between 6:45 and 7:00 in the morning. And I left late. And I did that to watch. There aren't a lot of legislators that in my 30 more years there came in that early. But the ones that did, I wanted to know who they were going to talk to, who they were going to be. I could figure out sometimes that there was something going on a bill that I cared about because of the activity. I would see a few legislators talking there on that, and I know, oh my God, they got that bill. Now, you know what? 50% of the time I might have been totally wrong. They were maybe talking about Sherry's chickens, but I knew to be watchful. Something might be coming down the pike, and the last thing you want to do is have your client surprised. So for me, as a one-person firm, I believe you have to be there all the time, and I really, the balloon's dying, so it must be close to the end of my time here. I think that even some of the larger firms, who fudge that a little bit because they can always send the last person hired to do their watching and listening for them, but I think being there is, very important. Many years ago, and I can't remember the issue, but it was decades in the 90s, there was a veto session called in the summer, and the veto session usually by law, and I won't go into it, deals with just the veto. If anybody tries to bring up some other issue, it's considered out of order. But there was a veto session. I did not have a client interested in the veto session. And I was sitting in the cafeteria the day of the veto session. It was, in July. And I was sitting with another lobbyist who didn't have a client. David Graham, an old reporter, came into the cafeteria and he saw us there and he said, "Why are you here? Your clients don't have any issue on this, or am I missing one of your clients?" I remember the guy with me said, "We're here because the legislators are here, and when they work, we work." And that's really what I believe. They are there doing a job that affects the people who hired me. So I need to be there finding out what they're doing that might affect my clients. So it's important to understand the process, to learn how, who is a lobbyist, are there qualifications? Well, you learn a lot on the job, even lawyers who are lobbyists, and there are a lot of lawyers who are lobbyists. They do have a leg up a little bit because they studied we call them in Vermont, the green books, because that's what the statutes are written in, green books. They know how to go through those green books. Well, eventually, if you're alone and you're not a lawyer, you learn how to go through the green books. You learn what you need to know. And members have the same thing when they go in. Most of them haven't looked at the law and how it's written and all. And so as you follow the bills, so now 884 bills or whatever it was I said came in this year. Am I gonna read every single one of them? Well, you learn to follow them for the headlines and there's a purpose written on a bill, and will that matter? So for most of my clients, I could almost always say ag, don't have to look at that any further, If it said consumer protection, big deal, I have to look at it because I had a client in that arena, and that's how you do it. And I think it's really important to understand the rules and the protocol. There's a lot of protocol that in committee, a lot of protocol on the floors, the Senate floor and the House floor. And it's the protocol and following the protocol that makes discussion or allows discussion to happen without breaking out into fights and arguments that would get us nowhere. So I love the protocol. And so to get prepared, and I'll be brief as we finish this up here. Know your topic, be prepared, be polite, be brief, be clear, accurate, candid. If you don't have an answer, tell the committee or tell the person you're talking to that you'll get them that answer, and then do it. Be patient, be persistent, and be pragmatic. Recognize that legislative schedules are made to be broken. And recognize when a slice is sometimes as good as a piece of the whole pie. because some years a slice is maybe all you're gonna get. Be grateful. Thank the people that you worked with. Thank everyone, particularly if they helped you. And if they did not help you, even if they somewhat, you felt they were working against you, thank them for listening to you. And do your follow-up. Anything that you said you would do for a committee or a legislative, do it. Remember, your relationships with the politicians you just worked with does not end when the gavel sounds at the end of the session. You'll be back again, most lobbyists. Working with the same committees, the same people sometimes, and sometimes on the very same bill, because in Vermont, the rule of thumb is a big change in a bill takes two to 6 sessions to get through. Just because it's gone through 1 year doesn't mean it can't come back another year. So ensure when you're working in the State House and with the lobbyists, don't burn with the legislators, don't burn bridges, don't be argumentative, don't belittle the person you work with, people you work with. Some of the best advice given to me very early in my career was when you walk out of the State House doors at the end of the day, be sure that you have acted in a manner that will let you come back through those doors to work another day. Now, I haven't touched at all on the technology, how internet and the technology plays a role in lobbying, and it has changed it a great deal. It hasn't always made it easier. It does connect lobbyists and lawmakers differently. And it's important, and it was absolutely necessary during COVID when they switched to a Zoom platform. So, and I was still lobbying actively then, so I worked in that platform, and now all of you work it, and we work with it in our meetings here. I do not believe that's the optimum way to lobby people or to inform people of what's going on. The availability of the internet is wonderful, but I don't believe it overrides any of the principles I talked about of developing relationships with people under the Golden Dome if you're going to work with them. I believe you need to talk with people in person when and if you can. But even when you're on Zoom, you want to leave the meeting being sure that you can come back to the same meeting site the next day. And I would be remiss if I did not mention how fortunate I believe I was to work in that beautiful, beautiful building that is our State House. The State House is a museum. It's lovingly cared for. And working in that museum for 40 years was really my pleasure. And I can honestly say that every time I drove off exit 8 on I-89 and came down the ramp and I would see that Golden Dome there, I really thank God every time that I was privileged to work in that building. And if any of you ever want a tour of the building with me, I would be happy to go. And going through some of my old stuff I found, and there's probably an update of this, but the facts of the State House haven't changed a lot. I've got 6 or 8 of these. I'll put them here. It's really a story of the State House and some history of it. And if you'd like it, and if you would like more, I can get more or updated ones for you. And thank you for listening to me. Yes.
I don't really have a question. It's more a statement in agreement with what you just said. As a child, my father was a freelance news reporter. So.
And I knew him.
Oh, I want to talk. Anyway, but as a child, during school vacations, we got to go with him. So we would spend the day and he'd give us the House or the Senate bill for the day, send us to the little balconies and have us keep score. And it just, I mean, I can't even go in there without just my heart swelling. So it's a beautiful building.
And
we're
isn't
very
there a black plaque for your dad in that? When you look in the house, there's a balcony, it circles the back of the house. And there is a corner would be the east end of it, where reporters sit. And there are 2 or 3, Mavis Doyle has a plaque and Bob Smith. has a plaque. They were very highly thought of reporters, and I had met him and I knew him, and he is remembered that way in the State House, and that's very nice.
Davis was amazing.
Yes, she was. Sure.
This is the last couple of weeks of the session. This is the one that lobbyists and legislators fear the most because everything is again moving and so fast. So, want to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, when you get to the end of the session, not only are the big bills, they always come out last, the appropriations bill and the tax bills always come out last. And it's close to impossible to keep up with all the movement that's going on in those bills. And we're all scurrying around and we sort of do trip over each other. And Terry was on a money committee because he was on institutions, and people don't remember that that's a money committee, but it deals with buildings and grounds and that building budget. And that's the time when somebody lost a bill. This year, an interesting one is the vaping one. And that bill is considered dead and going to be vetoed, and the veto will not be overridden. Well, not all of that bill is necessarily dead. There are parts of it that may get stuck on one of the bills he's talking about. And so you have to know that that can happen, because you've got to figure out, oh my gosh, I told my clients from the get-go, every single one, no, a bill is not dead until the end of the second year of the session. That's the only time a bill is dead. Until that time, it can be brought up any single time. You can block it in a million different ways, but you've got to know that, and you've got to be there, and it's exhausting. It really is. And there's no way for it not to happen. I watched it about 38, 40 times years, and you've got to have that push at the end to get to the end, to the final gavel. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for your.
And just,
I forgot, I bought tickets.
That's all right. I don't think we were too worried about it. All right, 888.
Ooh, a very good number.
Yeah.
so, you know, basically on behalf of your being willing to speak to us today, $50 will donation be made to the
Thank you.
WCS.
Thank you.
mentoring
That's
program.
very, very nice.
In your name. No.
Had a lobby story in terms of getting the winning ticket today. I was gonna ask John, but chance. John, do you know where the term lobbyist comes from?
Well, there are a couple, I know one, but there are other opinions